That brings us to the features of a written constitution. We have listed 6 features here, and I know that there are more. There are more that we can look into subsequently. There are more, but here we have listed just 6 features of a written constitution. That's the features. When we mean features, we mean the character, we mean the nature, we mean the unique characteristics of a written constitution. When you say features and characteristics, they also mean the same thing. So in the exam conditions, when you hear the word, what are the characteristics of a written constitution? Just note that characteristics and features mean one and the same thing. Okay? So like the example I used earlier, I say when you have a friend whose name is John and they ask you what are the features of John or what are the characteristics of John, it means that what are the peculiar traits to John who is your friend. So because you know John, you should know his character traits. For instance, you say, oh, John is the most intelligent student in my class, John is tall, John is handsome, John is friendly, and John is easygoing, he's a gentleman. So those character traits makes John different from every other person. So when we say what are the features or the characteristics of a thing, we mean what are those particular traits that are attributed only to that system or thing. So the features or the characteristics of a written constitution are as follows. 1, we say all its provisions are systematically and serially arranged, like the textbook illustration I gave to you earlier. You know that your textbook, for instance, is divided into parts. Like your government textbook, I'm very familiar with that. It's divided into several parts. Even within those parts, it is broken down into several chapters. So that's how the constitution is. It is systematically arranged as chapter by chapter. Chapter 2 of the Constitution of Nigeria, for instance, deals with the fundamental principles and the objectives of government, like government provision of good roads, provision of social amenities, provision of potable water, environmental, and all of the likes. They are in chapter 2. Chapter 4 then deals with things like our fundamental right, the right to life, the right. So we have several chapters in the Constitution. That's why we are saying here that the provisions of the Constitution are systematically and serially arranged. When you say serial, you mean one after the other. They are arranged according to a particular order. So a written constitution is systematically and is serially arranged in parts. Number 2, it is compiled and codified in one book. I said that earlier. Like the textbook illustration I give to you. I'm very sure with this textbook illustration I'm giving, you would always remember a written constitution. It is compiled and it is codified in one book. Like your typical government textbook, you discover that before this textbook became one single document, there were bits and pieces of research work in different places. So what the writer will do is to make a detailed research on each of these chapters to verify and lift bits and pieces from different sources. And then he will now arrange them in chapter form, that systematically and serially. Chapter 1, for instance, earlier we talked about the definition of government and we looked at it in 3 basic parts. So that's the systematic arrangement. Chapter 2, we look at the basic concept and principle of government. And now chapter 3, we are looking at constitutions. So there's a systematic and there's a serial arrangement of those parts. So when we say it is compiled and it is codified, it is compiled serially and arranged and codified. Compiled, you bring it together into one single book. So number 3, it is formulated by constituent assembly. That's the lawmaking organ of the state. It is formulated by a constituent assembly formed for this purpose only. That's the only purpose constituent assembly is made, is for the purpose of lawmaking. And one of the most prominent function of the legislative arm of government, which is the lawmaking arm of government. Number 4, the constituent is supreme and all the others of government are subordinate to the constitution. So we are saying that the constitution is supreme. It's supreme. I know if you remember earlier in chapter 2, we talked about the supremacy of the constitution. So we are saying here that most countries that practice such system, they also uphold the principle of constitutional supremacy. So we are saying that the written constitution is supreme and all the 3 organs of government are subordinate to the constitution. That means the doctrine of the supremacy of the constitution follows ordinary leaders, naturally will follow in a written constitution. So, number 5, we are saying that the 3 organs of government derive their power and functions in the policy from the Constitution. Derive their powers and functions, and also the limitations of those powers in the policy from the Constitution. Number 6 feature, we are saying that the right to judicial review. Judicial review is found in the written Constitution. You find the right to judicial review. That is, the judiciary can declare that a piece of legislation is null and void if it is not in accordance with the Constitution. I've said that time without number, that any legislation, any law made that is not in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, the judiciary can declare that it is null. It is null, that is, it is wrong and it is void, cannot exist.